morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it is a big, big week for your Seattle Seahawks. If you don't know it, there's a lot of key things that are going to be going on, and we're going to go through all of them today. Obviously, we just finished the second preseason game of the year and are heading towards the final preseason game, but there's a lot of critical aspects that are going to lead into this week ahead of that preseason game. I'm going to break them all down for you and get your week started with all the Seahawks news that you can handle. Thanks to everybody for always being so responsive when I move these start times around. I will always try to start as close to 8 a.m. as possible. This morning, a couple things got to shift around, and so starting a little bit early, but amazing to see all the folks already in chat. I want to wish a good morning to Old School Seahawk. Good morning to Jason Stolman, Travis Miles, Isaiah Johnson, The Pit, Christian Fuerte, DJ, Caleb, Rick, William, Home Chicken, love that, Easy E, Ball Hawkin, Corey Coleman, Avery, Daysum, everyone else, Isaac, so Noah, tons of people already in chat, and so happy to see you all here. So, yeah, I mean, we'll go over a couple things related to the game. I will cover a few things related to some PFF stuff that came out that we didn't have when I did the show yesterday, and also just kind of cover some of the storylines heading into the week for the NFL. Actually, let's start there a little bit. There were two games last night. The 49ers played the Saints, and the Broncos, the Seahawks' first week one opponent, played the Packers. And let's start with the Broncos game. I thought that I watched both games kind of simultaneously, flipping back and forth, and had one on one screen and one on another. And the storyline that you're going to hear coming out of the Broncos game, Bo Nix was fantastic, and he's going to win the starting job. And that's pretty much what you're going to hear about the Broncos. Well, what you're not going to hear is that the Packers didn't play any of their starters, and the Broncos played all of their starters. So a little bit misleading as far as the quality of play. And Bo Nix played well. I mean, he was 8 of 9, 80 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 140 rating. On the preseason so far, Bo Nix is 23 of 30, 76% completion, which is great, 205 yards, which is 6.8 yards per throw, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions for a 116.7 rating. Now, I sent out a tongue-in-cheek tweet last night about comparing Sam Howell's preseason to Brock Purdy's preseason, but in more serious note, here is Sam Howell's preseason. So he is 27 of 41, 65.9% completion rate. So that's not as good as the 76% that Bo Nix has. Sam Howell's thrown for 283 yards and a 6.9 yards per throw. Bo Nix is 6.8, so pretty similar. Sam Howell has 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. Bo Nix has 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. Sam Howell's rating is 102.0. Bo Nix's rating is 116.7. Now, I bring this up not because I'm necessarily saying one is better than the other, but there's also an important number that I didn't say, which is Bo Nix is 24 and Sam Howell's 23. There's another number that I'd bring up. Sam Howell started 18 games already in the NFL. He has finished in the top 10 in big-time throws already in an NFL season. Bo Nix hasn't played an NFL game. So you're hearing all of this hype around Bo Nix as the next franchise quarterback for the Broncos. Broncos fans are foaming at the mouth, which when have the Broncos fans been right about a quarterback situation or their team in years? But setting that aside, I continue to say, like, this has been a player in Sam Howell that I was ultra critical of in training camp, but has played very well during the preseason. And, there's some outlets that are like, hey, Sam Howell should be, he should be earning a starting spot for the Seahawks. That's not true either, because Geno Smith's better. But this notion that Bo Nix is some franchise quarterback to be, but Sam Howell is not, or he's a crappy backup, that's also not true. So I just, people don't handle complexity very well. They like to kind of compartmentalize things. There's this simple narrative: a rookie quarterback is somehow has more future potential than someone who's been in the league. Well, I don't see it that way for Sam Howell. I think Sam Howell's got a ton of talent and has been playing quite well. And I'm pretty happy that he is the Seahawks backup quarterback. So, Bo Nix was the number 12 overall pick in the draft this year in a quarterback-rich draft class. And I think it's a fair question about whether Bo Nix is a better prospect than Sam Howell. So if you want to really stretch it, think about it as like the Seahawks got a player the equivalent of the 12th overall pick, and they got the 16th overall pick with Byron Murphy. But that was just one storyline that, I just felt the need to kind of talk through. The other, talking about the 49ers game, I watched that. They were playing the Saints. The Saints did play their starters. It was an odd game for the 49ers. You had Brock Purdy starting that game, but basically none of his teammate starters were starting that game. They didn't start any of the running backs. Like, they didn't even start their third string running. Like, Jordan Mason didn't play, and there's a bunch of running backs didn't play. They didn't start any, like Deebo Samuel didn't play. They didn't start any of their, Juwan Jennings didn't play. Like, none of their receivers. So you kind of left Brock Purdy out there to dry, and he didn't look good. He was 2 of 6. He should have thrown an interception. I don't know how that guy, he has a leprechaun on his shoulder. Last year in the playoffs, he throws what should be an interception. It bounces off the defender to Brandon Ayuk for like a 60-yard pass. These crazy plays. He threw it directly to a Saints player last night, and I was like, oh man, he threw a pick. That's awesome. And then it didn't. It got dropped. And I'm like, how does this guy manage to have that kind of luck? I don't know. I don't get it. But in general, 49ers, I don't know that there was that much to learn. They weren't playing a lot of their starters. I did see the Saints, who were playing some of their starters, run the ball effectively against the 49ers. And so if I didn't actually look at the numbers there, but let's take a quick gander at that. The Saints, they put up 134 yards rushing on the 49ers, and I just continue to think that that's going to be a weak spot for that team. And I know they weren't playing their starters in that game on defense, but I don't think their starters are good run defenders either. So I just want to keep an eye on that. I think the offensive line for the 49ers is a problem. And obviously they'll get back Trent Williams. Everyone's like, oh, they'll just get him back. Well, getting back a 36-year-old guy who did not do any of training camp, if I'm a 49ers fan, I'm concerned about soft tissue injuries, pulls, groins, hamstrings, things like that, to just jump right in. Now, Walter Jones, all those years, he kind of did that thing. He was an outstanding athlete. Trent Williams is as well. I think Walter Jones was a little bit more nimble of an athlete than Trent Williams is, but, he's going to have to come in here, in there, I should say, and jump out right away. And we'll just see. We'll see. There's a lot on his shoulders. All the focus has been on Brandon Ayuk. I'm not worried. I would not be worried if I was a 49ers fan that they're going to get Trent Williams signed and in, but I do have some question about how he's going to hold up over the course of the season. Want to take a quick moment to recommend, if you haven't already, take advantage of this promo that we're running with ftnfantasy.com. Promo code Hawks gets you 15% off a subscription to Stats Hub. Amazing information. I was just looking at it this morning. I was looking at the Seahawks EPA per play when they were going against man coverage versus zone coverage. And then you can actually put in there like yards of separation that receivers are getting. You can talk about whether the coverage itself was tight or not. Like, it's amazing the amount of detail you can get into to figure out how teams played against man versus zone. How did they do against the blitz? It's just a treasure trove of data that's useful for your fantasy leagues. It's useful for other things. And because of the partnership that we've forged, you guys get a 15% off subscription. So it's less than like $10 a month. I think it's less than $9 a month. So promo code Hawks gets you 15% off. Take advantage of that. And I think you will be happy that you did. Speaking of which, tomorrow, I'm super excited. Mike Randall from FTN Fantasy is going to join us for what's going to be a weekly appearance where we go through some fantasy football stuff. Truth of the matter is, I don't do fantasy football anymore. I used to do it in high school, and you see how obsessed I am about the Seahawks. I was obsessed about that too. And I did fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, fantasy football. And I will say I did pretty well in those leagues. I won some good money, but I would get so obsessive, man. I would check lineups. I would make every trade, waiver claims. And then when I got older, I just didn't like the feeling of attending Seahawks games or watching Seahawks games and having something pull against my rooting for my team. Like, I'm like, I want the Seahawks to win, but I want this guy on the other team to play well. I didn't like that. So I've kind of flushed fantasy from my personal life, but I totally get the appeal and love that people do it. And I love the camaraderie of it. And so we've actually got a fantasy football league for YouTube members. If you go in the community tab, you have to be I think you have to be, maybe it's any YouTube member, but I think it might be club level or higher. I can't be sure. And then also Patreon members, patreon.com/hawkblogger. We've got a patron running that league. And then we've got a YouTube member running the YouTube member league. And so if you want to join and be part of that, meet some more folks in the community, that's a great thing to do. And FTN Fantasy. So Mike Randall's going to be on every week with us. Tomorrow we're going to talk about sleepers, risers, fallers. We're going to talk about Seahawks players. We're going to look at the matchups with the first few teams that the Seahawks are playing, the Broncos and the Patriots, anything that stands out there. We're going to take your questions. So patron questions and YouTube member questions. I will ask Mike Randall on the show tomorrow. So great. I think it's personally, even though I have not been playing fantasy football, I always like listening on the radio when they're going through the week's matchups and all that kind of stuff. He's also going to go through draft strategy because obviously draft's happening right now for fantasy. So it'll be great. Awesome stuff. Looking forward to talking with Mike tomorrow and encourage you guys all to check that out. Like I said, that'll be a weekly thing we do throughout the season. We got a chat here from 67 Plush, who has been a member for 4 months, man. I am so grateful for especially the longtime members. So many people have gotten free memberships, and I really, really hope that you all extend those and stay with us as members. It's a super important way to support the show, and I think it's a great way to really become part of this community. So hopefully that will be the first of many people that stick around for this long. He says, John Schneider hasn't received enough credit for this offseason. Even if it's premature, I don't see where he could have done better at any point. I agree. I think that what will be lost in the discussion of John Schneider's offseason is it's not just player acquisition. He hired Mike Macdonald. And Mike Macdonald, the reason that Mike Macdonald chose the Seahawks over his other options was because of John Schneider and the chemistry he had and the reputation that John Schneider has. That's on record. And I've verified that in conversations with people over at the VMAX. So John Schneider did that. John Schneider helped get Leslie Frazier, as well as Aden Dirty, who is an acquaintance of Dan Quinn, who John Schneider knows well. So a lot of the, Ryan Grubb, like all of these things, John Schneider had his fingers in or touched as they happened. Plus the decisions that he made, like I think there's some secret, like some decisions other people might not have made. He chose to keep Geno Smith. He chose to, restructure Tyler Lockett's contract in a way that made it possible for him to stick around, but lowered his cap hit. He got rid of Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, which I not everybody would have done. I just think that he really turned things around this offseason and really gave a fresh start. Think about if Mike Macdonald was hired, you think, oh, well, that's a fresh start by itself. But if Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams were still here, I don't think it would have felt quite as much like a fresh start. If Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner are here, I don't think it would have felt as much like a fresh start. That doesn't mean that in all cases those are going to be, trading out for a better player. I happen to think in most cases it will be, but it is just overall there's a space for new leadership to in the locker room to step forward, and there's a new coaching staff, which I happen to think might be the best coaching staff the Seahawks have ever had. I think that that's possible, that on the other side of this, we will say, man, that full collection of talent at the coaching staff level is just obscene. So yeah, totally agree. 67 plush. And thank you for being such a long time member. Love seeing that. Let's see. We've got a new member, Eric Davison. Eric, welcome to the crew, man. So great to have you. Love it. And there's been questions about how to gift memberships. By the way, you have to either be on desktop or on Android. The way to do that is click the join, and then there's a opportunity to gift. And if you want to receive a free membership, you click on the join button, and then there's 3 dots, and there should be an option for gifting. You have to turn gifting on in order to actually receive one of these free memberships that people continually give away, which I love to see. So, all right. Let's get to kind of some of the heart of what I wanted to talk about in the show today. Why do I think this is such a big week? Why is this such a big week? Well, some of it is related, a lot of it's related to injuries. And it's related to kind of injury watch this week, because this is the final week of prep before the final preseason game. As of now, there are 3 weeks to go before the regular season begins. I always forget that there's an extra week buffer between, well, technically, is there more than a week buffer? There's like a 2-week buffer between the last preseason game. Yeah, there's a 2-week buffer between the last preseason game and the first game of the season, September 8th. And so you kind of have to start getting on the field at this point in order to really be ready to play. And so let's go through this in order. I think Connor Williams is question number 1. And he was on the field last week, walking around with the team, following along, but he did not participate in any activities. And the explanation from Mike Macdonald was that he was going to spend a week with the sports science guys, which is the trainers, and then they'd take a look. And so there was a chance, the expectation Mike Macdonald has, that Connor Williams will be ready for week 1 of the season. That's the plan. Connor Williams said that he was about 95% when he was doing his press conference a week ago today, so a week ago Monday. And so question number 1 is, will Connor Williams be participating in practice today? And my assumption is yes. So I go to practice later this morning, and my expectation is Connor Williams will be going through drills with the team. Maybe he won't do everything, but I expect he's going to be going through position drills, and maybe he'll do team stuff, but we'll see. And that's a huge question number 1, because as much as we want to believe, and it all signs seem to point to that he is going to be available, we don't know that yet. And so If he is, that is a very positive sign that he will be available week one. And that, again, it puts question into how are they going to handle the backup center position. And that's kind of question number 2 related to that, which is if Connor Williams is on the field, is Raekwon O'Neal still taking snaps at center? He did that last week, but maybe that was just because they were down one center, having traded away Nick Harris. Maybe it's just an emergency thing that they're playing with. If Raekwon O'Neal is still getting snaps at center with Connor Williams on the field, then the opportunity still exists that Olu Oluwatimi may not make it on this final roster. As of now, I would expect that Olu is the backup center, but I think it would be very hard for them to cut Raekwon O'Neal. I think he's a better offensive lineman than Olu, and if they believe that he can function as a backup center, I think they'd keep him. I think there's this other farther fetched, I don't know if that's the right grammar, but in any event, less likely scenario, but possible, which is that they keep Raekwon O'Neal, they cut Olu, and they keep either Olu or Jalen Sundell on the practice squad, and that those guys are available to call up at any given week to be on an active roster, but they don't take one of the 53-man roster spots. The challenge there is you got to have someone on your active roster each week that can be a backup center. So the reason they would do that is to protect Raekwon O'Neal from the initial waivers and to keep him on the roster. And then they could, for 3 times, call up Olu. And maybe during that time, they are cross-training Raekwon on center, and then they can make a final decision. And if they need to, sign Olu back as their, onto their roster and get rid of somebody else. That's a possibility, but these are kind of getting a little bit more unlikely, I guess. Before I get to the next conversation, the next player, let me bring in a super chat from Avery, one of our members. I think John extended Geno before the start of the offseason. I think if John extended Geno before the start of the offseason, it would be not only good financially, but I think the team chemistry would be insane. Geno doesn't have to prove anything. Well, Avery, I love the concept. I, as you know, am in favor of them extending Geno before this season begins because I think that he's going to play well enough that his price tag is going to go quite a bit higher. I do think he has a lot to prove, though, still. As much of a Geno fan as I am, he needs to prove that he can play against, the 49ers. He needs to prove that he can play consistently enough to at a high level to, have this team be more than a 1 win over 500 type of team. I think he needs to prove that he can be the general of a top 5 offense and not just a top 12 offense. I think he can do all of those things, but I do think he has stuff to prove. And I think that the Seahawks would be wise to have kind of planned for that ahead of time. But I understand there's a lot of folks that feel differently and want to make sure that there's a lot of folks that are like, oh, if Geno plays really well, who cares? There's no one else that's going to want him. I don't know. The way I think he's going to play this season, I don't believe that's true. So we'll see. I think Geno is due for a pretty transformational year. So that was the Connor Williams piece as well as the Olu and Raekwon O'Neal piece. So those are big storylines that I'm going to be paying close attention to this week. The next one. Now, this one's a long one, long discussed, but I'm going to bring it back up. I'm assuming that Abe Lucas is going to be on PUP. That's where he's been up until now. I assume that there's been no updates from Mike McDonald about that. But I am curious. This would be the week. If there's a chance that Abe's going to come off that, today could be the day. This week could be the week. So I want to see, this is kind of maybe the go, no-go week for Abe Lucas. And so I will be obviously checking that out and seeing if Abe Lucas is looking like he's going to practice. If he's coming back, that's a pretty tectonic shift in that offensive line room and has the potential to really shake up the roster. If Abe Lucas is back, Stone Forsythe, I think, is gone. Um, I think that the only reason Stone Forsythe has a good chance to make this roster is because they don't really have a backup left tackle other than Stone on the roster as of right now, because George Fant is playing starting right tackle because Abe Lucas is injured. If Abe Lucas is back and there's a chance he's going to make it for week 1, then George Fant can be your backup swing tackle on both sides, and you don't need Stone Forsythe because George Fant's better than Stone Forsythe. And then you have a better chance to keep a guy like Mike Jarrell or some of these other players, or Raekwon O'Neal or whoever else. So the Abe Lucas thing is a big deal, something to keep an eye on. And my assumption is he's still going to be not practicing, but that's something I will keep an eye on as well. The next bit of thing, kind of injury news to pay attention to is Jerome Baker. Jerome Baker has been injured for most of training camp. That has given Tyrese Knight the chance to be your starter next to Tyrell Dodson. And Tyrese Knight's played wonderfully. PFF didn't think so this past week. I did. And I'm not changing my opinion. I think that he had a really nice game. And so what does that mean? Well, if Jerome Baker is not practicing this week, I don't think that means that it's certain that Tyrese Knight will start in week 1, but I think it starts to make that a real possibility. And I haven't thought that was going to be a possibility up until now, but Jerome Baker's got to get on the field. He's got to get on the field. I think he needs to play in this game on Saturday. And so we'll find out. We don't know how injured he is. I will say that, Mitch, who's a Dolphins fan, has made it clear that Jerome Baker is one of those guys that's always on the injury report, which is not fun. But let's just find out if he can get on the field. Maybe he's just a guy that doesn't like practicing, which I also don't love. But, I want to see this guy on the field. I want to see his chemistry with Tyrell Dodson. I want to see him making plays. And frankly, all I've seen him so far is pretty much in 1v1 drills and position drills. So I can't even speak to really how he looks in this defense. And the good news is that's not the catastrophe that it would have been, or I would have thought it would have been to start the training camp, whereas like Tyrese Knight's developmental prospect and they don't have guys. I think Tyrese Knight could play week 1 and do okay. I think that John Radigan, Patrick O'Connell have the ability to play in a game and not kill you. I don't want that to be your normal starter, but I've thought both of them have had good camps and shown some real promise. So I don't think the inside linebacker position is as dire of a situation as I think it had been before, but Jerome Baker's got to get back out there. It's time for him to be on the field. His teammates need to see him. The coaches need to see him, and he needs to just start becoming a bigger part of this team. It's time. It's time for him to get out there. The next guy to keep an eye on, Dre'Mont Jones. Dre'Mont Jones has been injured on and off through this training camp with soft tissue stuff, hamstrings, groins, whatever it's been. And he's a big part of this defense. The coaching staff spent a lot of time describing how they plan to use him at all sorts of positions along the line. We saw in this Titans game that Derek Hall was shrinking down inside to an interior defensive tackle in rush situations for kind of a NASCAR package. That's a Dre'Mont Jones role, and they want him available, and he generally just has not been. Now, the good news with Dre'Mont Jones is when he's available, I think you know exactly what you're getting with him. He is a physical, tough football player. I don't think he's ever going to live up to $17.5 million free agent deal he signed, but I don't think that's going to be because he's a bad player. I just think he's never going to be like a 10 sack guy. He's never going to be a guy that just like maybe not ever makes a Pro Bowl. He's just going to be a quality, defensive player, physical player that can play the run and rush the passer well, and he's valuable. So I think most teams would like to have Dre'Mont Jones on their roster. I don't know that most teams would want to pay $17.5 million a year for him, but I do think that they want him on their roster, and I think that it's time for him to start getting out there. I don't think it's as critical that he gets there this week, but it would be nice to see him in a game this weekend. And my initial thought was that they wouldn't play a lot of starters in this final game, but a couple things have kind of shifted my perspective, or at least opened my eyes. One is Brady Henderson, who I have a ton of respect for and I think has good ears inside that organization, is pretty confident, like almost 100% sure that they're going to play some of the starters, especially Geno, in this final game. His reasoning is that because basically the only defense that the Seahawks offense has gone against so far is a variation of Mike Macdonald's. They've gone against, obviously, Mike Macdonald's defense in practice. Then they went against Jesse Minter with LA with the Chargers, which is a variation of Mike's defense. And then they went against the Titans, which has Denard Wilson, which is a variation of Mike's defense. So this last game is against the Browns. You've got a different defensive scheme. You've got Jim Schwartz running that, and obviously arguably the best defense in the NFL last year, or close to it. Don't know who they're going to play in that game, but Brady's reasoning is they're going to want to see Geno and give Geno an opportunity to play against a different type of defense. I guess. I mean, I don't know that that's so critical, but fine. And then the other thing I saw is Brian Callahan, the coach for the Titans. He talked about how he's going to play starters pretty extensively in their final preseason game. And knowing that Mike Macdonald did a lot of planning with that Titans group and that their coaching staffs are pretty tight at this point, I wonder if they coordinated and they were like, okay, we're not going to play our starters in this game, but we're going to go hard in our joint practice because we both are planning to play our starters more extensively in the final game. I don't know. That's just total speculation, but it just made me think that maybe we will see more starters in this game than I originally anticipated. I thought the last game of the preseason generally has been protect everybody at all costs and just get the back end of your roster a lot of playing time. Sounds like maybe that might not be the case. So if that's true, it would be good to see Dre'Mont Jones out there. Definitely be good to see Jerome Baker out there. And it would be great to see Connor Williams, if that's even realistic. I mean, how cool would that be to do? And I will be there watching that game in the press box. First time I will be watching an official Seahawks game in Lumen Field in the press box. I'm going to see if they allow me to live stream from there. I'm guessing the answer is going to be no, but I am curious. If I can, I will do another watch party, but I will do commentary from the press box, which would be fun. We got a super chat here from Zabel Thomas. Another new member says, outside linebacker Daryl Taylor feels like a great trade asset to acquire something we need. I think he's a certified good pass rusher, but I don't think Mike Mack will like his poor run defense. What are your thoughts? Well, Zabel, thank you for the super chat. And yeah, I think Daryl Taylor is on the list of trade candidates for the Seahawks. I'll give you that quick rundown of who I think are trade candidates for the Seahawks on this roster. I think Daryl Taylor's top of that list. I think Mike Jackson, the cornerback, is on that list. I think that Stone Forsythe could be on that list. I don't think it's crazy to say that Olu could be on that list, depending on if there's teams that need a center. Other guys that I'm just doing a quick glance here that could be on that list. I think those are the primaries. But, some of the receivers could be on that list. D. Eskridge. I don't know that anyone's going to trade for him, but maybe. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. But I think right now Daryl Taylor will be on the roster. But he is a capable pass rusher, and there's a lot of teams that need edge help. I continue to see the edge group differently than the other people in the press corps, and I think other people around. I think the Seahawks edge group is pretty deep. Dre'Mont Jones is part of that group. You got Dre'Mont Jones, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, and Uchenna Nwosu. That's 4 guys. You rarely need to rotate 5 guys at the edge rush position. And then beyond that, you've got Daryl Taylor at your 5th one, and then you've got Nelson Caesar and Jamie Sheriff as 6 and 7. I don't think it's nearly as bad of a spot as a lot of other people seem to think it is. And I'm in this funny position now where people are like super down on, like, they're skeptical of Boye Mafe because they don't think he's had that great of a training camp. I'll just say this. A lot of folks watch the 1v1s and that's all they watch. And Boye Mafe has not done well in the 1v1 pass rush drills. I don't think he's won a single rep as far as he really has not done well. And so I think that's coloring a lot of perception. But I've charted pretty much every play in training camp, and I've seen him beat Charles Cross multiple times in team drills for sacks. I've seen him beat George Fant multiple times for sacks. In the mock game, he had a few sacks. Like, I don't think Boye Mafe is like a problem. I don't think I've never said that I think he is like the next great Seahawks pass rusher, but I'm not worried about him the way other people are. I just think if you see him as like what he was last year, which is a guy that is, an above average pass rusher. He's a guy that, should get between 5 and 9 sacks a year. Then I think that's what he's going to be. If you think he's a guy that's, you're looking at him as, is he going to be the next 12, 13, 14 sack guy? I don't know that I see that in him. So that's just a difference. Which, by the way, we can take a look at some point at some of the stats for him. It's a good reminder that if you want to get 15% off a subscription to ftnfantasy.com, the stats hub there, use promo code Hawks and you get 15% off, and it is great. You will not regret it. The types of stats you get here, you would pay $6,000 a year at SIS, which is like the official, stats provider. I know guys that have like bundled together 10, 15 people to share a subscription to SIS. And this stats hub at FTN Fantasy, I think, gives you pretty much all the data you could ever want for less than $9 a month, especially if you're using the promo code HAWKS, HAWKS. So go over to ftnfantasy.com and sign up now. You will not regret it. All right. We got another super chat. This one's from Detail Oriented, who we all are hoping is healing up well. He says, Brian, I think Mike will want to install and see his final prep put into action. He's really focused on having the team prepared above all else. So I can see him playing starters to do final tweaks. Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Detail, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm of two minds. One, it'll be fun to watch the starters. Like, I would enjoy doing that. Like, great. On the other hand, I'm like, put them all in bubble wrap. I want to see them week 1 against Bo Nix and the Broncos, and I want to make sure that they shove that ball down Sean Payton's throat. So I don't really care about whether they play in this final preseason game. So if I had to really pick, I'd probably say put them in bubble wrap, just because we're at that point in the preseason where I'm like, just get us to the game 1. But I'm not lying. It would be fun to watch them play in this final game. And, I think defensively, Mike McDonald's got a standard. You heard him talk about the fact that during the joint practices, he was basically standing with the defense the whole time. I think that's a good sign. I think it's a good sign that he feels like he can dedicate that kind of focus to the part of the team that he is most qualified to help lift and help coach, and that he also feels enough confidence in Ryan Grubb and that side of the building to really be the quote head coach of the offense. And that's just part of the beauty of this coaching staff that they've assembled. But yeah, I think he wants the defense to perform in a certain way. I don't think that the last half of that game left a good taste in anybody's mouth. So there's another kind of philosophy here, which is maybe they don't want to play many of their back end of the roster guys because they want to hide them and have the best chance of, when they put them on waivers, be able to re-sign them. So that would be another vote for playing more of your starters and then your second string, and not really playing as many of the third string guys. So there's a lot of strategically divergent ways to approach that final preseason game. But yeah, appreciate the super chat from Detail Oriented, one of our most, not one of, probably our most generous YouTube member who's donated hundreds of memberships at this point, and greatly appreciate it. All right, so keeping moving. So that was Dre'Mont Jones. There are new injuries, unfortunately, to pay attention to. And this is one that we will, I think, learn a little bit more about today, which is Pharaoh Brown. We don't know what the situation is. We know that there was a report initially that he was carted off the field last week in Tennessee during a joint practice. Then Mike McDonald said it wasn't a knee, it was like a foot or an ankle or something like that. Wasn't very specific. Doesn't know how bad it is. I would encourage everyone not to freak out about the cart thing. There are guys, Jordan Addison got carted off and he's okay. Like, it happens. They're just cautious in those situations. So I'm not jumping to the conclusion that it's some super serious injury. However, the Seahawks did sign 2 tight ends over the weekend to their roster. That is not a good sign. And these are just back end of the roster types of players. I don't think that they're clearly like going to take over roster spots for the active roster, the 53. But it does indicate that they're going to be without a couple of tight ends for a while. Now, one of those injuries is Pharaoh Brown. The other injury was to Jack Westover. Jack did not play in the preseason game. And so I think, one of those is probably a little less critical. No offense to Jack, but I don't think he has a good chance of making this roster. I'm not even sure he was going to make the practice squad as the way things were going. So there's also some injury to Noah Fant, but I don't think that's serious. So I'm going to kind of set that aside. The Pharaoh Brown injury is really a critical one to keep an eye on. I think he's a huge part of the ability for this team to establish itself as a physical run team. I think if you watched him in that first game against the Chargers, that guy moves people. And he's huge, man. He's almost like I've seen tackles that are his size. Like, he's a big dude, and I think very critical to how they're going to establish the run game. And I don't think they have someone else. AJ Barner has not proven himself to be anything close to Pharaoh Brown as a blocker. And so what does it mean? Tyler Mayberry starts to jump up. He is a good player. He is not great, but he's a good player. He's a serviceable player. You can be fine with Tyler Mayberry. Brady Russell obviously has been playing really well and is a good blocker. And I'm not hating Brady Russell getting more snaps. I think that he is someone to keep an eye on, but it does raise the possibility. There are a lot of blocking tight ends in the NFL. Not all of them are great, and not all teams care about that as much. But if there's someone that started to stand out that way, it's possible the Seahawks might be looking to snag somebody off of another team's roster. I'm going to do a quick search. For run blocking tight ends in preseason so far. Like, who is Brenton Strange? Brenton Strange for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Did he play during the regular season for them? He did. He played 183 snaps last year. But that's a guy who got an 87.5 run blocking grade for Jacksonville. Thomas Odukoya for Tennessee has an 80.3 run blocking grade. Joey Wilson for Green Bay has an 80. Brady Russell is 4th in the NFL during the preseason with a 78.9. Darnell Washington, hard to see that, man. I love Darnell Washington. I would have loved to have him. John Bates for Washington has a decent run block grade. Tip Ryman, another one of my favorites, but for the Cardinals, 76.9. Devin Culp for Tampa Bay. Interestingly, he's only got 9 snaps, but 76.7 run block grade. So anyway, my point being, maybe they look around to see if there's a blocking tight end that they want to trade for at the back end of a roster. But that's another one I'm going to keep an eye on. We're going to find out about, I'm sure we're going to talk about Pharaoh Brown at Mike McDonald's press conference today. and maybe he'll give us a little bit more news there about what's going on there. So those are kind of the big injury related questions. The other question, I think, going into this week, it is the right guard position. Let's assume Connor Williams is out there. Then Laken Tomlinson's your left guard. I know people don't want that to be the answer, but it's going to be the answer. Laken Tomlinson's your left guard. And then you had Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford kind of in a dead heat going into this game. And this week, who's going to get starting snaps at right guard? I am very curious about that. If you're curious about how these guys performed from a PFF perspective, PFF loved Anthony Bradford's game against Tennessee. They gave him an 80.5 overall grade, 85.1 pass block, 74.8 run block. Christian Haynes got a much lower grade. He got a 59.6 overall grade. I think that's because also a penalty. So keep that in mind. They do give you a pretty big knock for penalties because he had an 85.1 pass block grade, which is the exact same as Anthony Bradford. So he had the equivalent pass block grade as Anthony Bradford, where Anthony Bradford separated himself as in the run block grade. He was 74.8. Christian Haynes was 62.9. So I don't know. We're going to find out this week which one of them. And as much as I'm kind of rooting for Christian Haynes because I've been a little bit, I don't know. I'm concerned about Anthony Bradford's pass protection over the course of a season. He's an amazing athlete, super strong dude. If he can find it, great. I don't care who is the starting right guard as long as they're good at their job. That's all I care about. And so I'm very curious to see how they do that this week and who's going to get those reps. So that's another big question heading into this week. Other than that, let me do a quick scan through the roster. So another piece. So it's so funny. People have so because I have said that George Holani is ahead of Kenny McIntosh, and because I spent time saying I thought George Holani had a better first game against the Chargers than Kenny McIntosh, it's become now the story that I favor, that I personally like George Holani over Kenny McIntosh. I don't care. I don't care. I am telling you what my eyes have seen, and you guys can agree, disagree, whatever. I've learned to trust my eyes over the years and what I've seen, and I also interpreting what I'm seeing and hearing from coaches. I still think George Holani is a much more complete running back than Kenny McIntosh from a blocking perspective, inside running, outside running, and receiving. I just think he's a complete package. But Kenny had a terrific game this week, and he definitely closed the gap. And I think there was a gap with Holani. Now, there's this question. Are we going to see Kobe? George Holani was getting the third string snaps last week. Zach Charbonnet is battling a back injury. That opens up the chance that they keep a fourth running back. I've been having them only keep 3. They might keep 4 if Charbonnet is really a question mark. So that's something else. Is Charbonnet going to be practicing or not? What's the kind of prognostication or prognosis, I should say, for Zach Charbonnet? But really, who's getting third string running back snaps? My guess is it's going to be Holani, but don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm saying I want to see this stuff come this week, come practice time, because you just don't know. And I'm curious, Kenny McIntosh had a good day in pass protection. He only had to do 1 snap as a pass protector, and he got a 73.4 grade. So cool. That's good news for him. For what it's worth, George Holani also had 1 pass protection snap, and he had a 73 grade. So, they were essentially the same in pass pro for 1 snap. So I am going to be keeping an eye on that. I think that's another position to watch out for. Otherwise, I mean, I'm looking through the roster. I think those are the big question marks. I do have some question about safety, but I don't have big questions. I think Ty Okada is ahead of Marquise Blair still, even though a lot of people love, Marquise Blair is an uber talented player. I still just don't see him overtaking that at this point. I have Kobe Bryant ahead of both of those guys, but that's something else I will keep an eye on. But those are kind of the big storylines heading into this week. And I will have your instant practice report as soon as practice ends, as soon as the press conference is finished. As always, you're going to want to click subscribe and click the bell to get notified when I go live, because I can't really predict when that will be. It varies after each practice. So keep that in mind. I want to thank Detail Oriented. He provided this little beautiful thing that I will try using today, the gimbal. I always feel like gimbal sounds a little funny as a word, but in any event, that's what I'm going to use to hopefully give you a steadier experience for my post-practice report today. So be there for that. And as I said, tomorrow we're going to be doing some fantasy football with Mike Randall, so you want to keep an eye on that as well. What else am I missing? So I think that's the bulk of it. I do want to just say one more time, ftnfantasy.com, use promo code Hawks. You will not regret it. It is amazing, the data that you can get there. 15% off with promo code Hawks. So keep an eye on that. All right, everybody. If you have not already clicked like, please take a second to do that. I really, really appreciate it. And let's subscribe on the channel. I mean, we are, I think, like 11.3, 11.4, 11.4 in terms of subscribers. Let's get up to 12. Getting to 12K prior to the first game of this season would be good luck. So let's get as many people subscribed to this channel as possible. Send it to your friends, send it to your families. I'd appreciate it. If you haven't gone to Instagram and given @HawkBlogger a follow, please do that. We're at just over 500 followers. I want to get up to 1,000 at least before the season. So I want to grow that channel as much as possible. And so we're actually, if you haven't noticed, we're starting to do more shorts and reels content. I've got someone who's helping out with that, and it's very cool. So hopefully you're enjoying some of the new shorts and reels that are out there. A lot of that's going to be going on Instagram as well. So @HawkBlogger on Instagram, would appreciate it. Question, a super chat from Garth Knight says, Brian, is Mark Rodgers, Russell Wilson's agent, a total wanker? No. I mean, I've talked to him before. I will tell you a couple quick stories about Mark Rodgers. One, he would actually at times take articles that I wrote on hawkblogger.com and send them to John Schneider. And then I'd see John Schneider at some event, and John would come up to me with a printed version of my article and says, what's this? And like one of them I remember was an article I wrote. I think it was called like Sophie's Choice. If you could only keep one, John Schneider or Russell Wilson, who would it be? And for what it's worth, my conclusion in that article was John Schneider. This was during one of the first or maybe the second contract extensions. So I don't know. I think John still didn't appreciate it, but I just write whatever I write, and I honestly never think about who's going to read it. I just write what's on my obsessive mind about the Seahawks. The other story about Mark Rodgers is I think he's been catfished. I'll just leave it at that. I know for a fact he's been catfished on Twitter by some prominent misleading Seahawks accounts. And so that's a story for another day. But he seems like a nice enough guy, but I'm glad the Seahawks aren't really dealing with him anymore. And if you want to talk, people are like, oh man, I actually had I think it was Jeff Simmons sent me a text this weekend. He's like, man, if it hits with Derek Hall and with Mafe and Charles Cross, that trade is just going to be unreal. And Devin Witherspoon. And I'm like, we all know the trade's unreal. So but I think he was just saying because there's development in some of those players this year. My response was, even if those players don't do much, which I think they will. Just the fact that the Seahawks did not sign Russell Wilson to that extension and have to be his team while he's doing what he's doing now, just that alone was a massive win for this organization, because he was going to get paid. He was going to get that extension from whichever team he was on, whether it's Seattle or somewhere else. Can you imagine if the Seahawks were saddled with that $250 million deal with Russell Wilson playing the way Russell Wilson's playing? And if you didn't see over the weekend, it was not pretty. People are like, oh man, this guy needs to retire. Like, it's bad. I think that also does not help the chances that Brandon Ayuk is going to choose to play. But that's another conversation. We got another super chat from Colin Lundstrom. He says, no question, just a general appreciation and admiration for you, Brian, and the hard work that we see and don't see. Thank you from all of us. That is really nice of you, Colin. By the way, I don't read these before I put them on, which is probably a bad idea. Someone's going to put something on there that I shouldn't put on the screen. But that is very nice of you to say. Colin is not only a YouTube member, but he is a patron, and I super appreciate that. If you haven't signed up at patreon.com/hawkblogger, I'd ask you to do so. I think you'll love doing it. You get access to the Slack channel. You get to ask the Real Hawk Talk crew questions every week. You get the audio versions of this podcast every day. So it's a great deal. It's a great community. And if you love the chat here, you get that just on a constant basis, where you can just do it during days at work, where you just want to go off and talk to people that are friendly and nice, as opposed to going to Twitter where, you never know what kind of responses you're going to get. That Slack community is really cool. So patreon.com/hawkblogger, great place to go and hang out with other cool fans. All right, everybody. I'm going to wrap there so I can get my workout in and then hop on my bike and get down to training camp, hopefully get some fun interviews today. And, there's a question here quickly. Signing up for Patreon doesn't make you a YouTube member as well. No, it doesn't. They are separate. I wish there was a way to combine it. I wish there was a way I could grant YouTube membership to my Patreon members, but YouTube does not allow that. And so there's YouTube specific functionality that you get by being a YouTube member. And if you only consume this show or you consume my content on YouTube, then being a YouTube member is the way to go. If you also read the blog, if you also, want the audio versions, if you want to have more community ongoing, then Patreon's the way to go. And there's a lot of people that do both. It's not crazy to do both. The bottom level, I think Hawk's Nest for YouTube is like $2.99 a month, and the Patreon membership's like $5 a month. So it's not crazy to do both. And if you want to do higher levels of YouTube, that's also great. So appreciate all of you, and looking forward to what we're going to find out today. It's a big day for the Seahawks, and I'm really curious. So all right, everybody, have a wonderful day. I am Brian Nemhauser at Hawkblogger on Instagram and on Twitter. This has been episode 148 of Hawkblogger Mornings. Take care.